Welcome, blockheads. It is August 28th, 2024. It is 1 p.m. Eastern time in the United States over here. This week on the podcast, we're tackling the death of the 9 to 5. Is the 9 to 5 going away? Reid Hoffman thinks so, and he's not the only one. Sony is entering the Web3 world. We'll tell you how and why. And Russia is positioning to launch crypto exchanges. We'll tell you what this means, how to prepare, and this week's weekly insight into the digital business revolution. This is episode 91 of Business on the Block. I am joined, as always, by my lovely co-host, Michelle Peterson-Clark.
Hi, everyone.
And Mike Neubauer.
Good afternoon.
Michelle will handle the marketing and angles. Mike will bring the operations insights, and I'll talk sales and strategy. Okay, I'm going to take us right to story number one. LinkedIn founder predicts the death of the 9 to 5 by 2034, within 10 years, that is. The co-founder of LinkedIn, Reid Hoffman, has gone viral on the internet in the last 2 days. He's predicting that the typical 9 to 5 job will no longer exist by 2034. He says the future worker will not necessarily be employed, but rather will participate in the gig economy. He describes that as them working with multiple companies across multiple sectors, all under contract. So in his view, in the future, freelancers will make considerably more than permanent employees. We'll start off with thoughts on this one. Michelle, I'd love to get your thoughts, feedback, and insights. What do you think? Is Reid off his rocker, or is this the new thing?
I think that it's partly true and partly not true. Because I think it's pretty easy for all of us to be able to list jobs that gig economy people can't do. So production line work, factory work, things where a collective of people need to turn up in order to make things function. So from that point of view, there'll be a segment of the economy that will be required, and whether they do a 9 to 5 or they do a 6 till 6 a.m. or they do a 2 till 10, whatever, depending on the shifts that they're on. But there's going to be a proportion of people always doing that. Then you're going to have the people who are tradespeople who can't ever be replaced by AI. As far as I know, ChatGPT cannot come and fix our broken washing machine. My husband had to actually physically use his hands. Now, I think he did Google some information about it, but other than that, in order for it to be fixed, he had to actually do something. So there's that proportion of the economy for jobs. Now, whether or not those people all turn into be, contractors or freelancers, I don't know. But then there's that segment, which I guess at the moment is probably, let's say it was 30% of the economy, maybe 20%. I think what he thinks is that might be 60 or 70 by 2034 or whatever year it was that he said. There's lots of problems with that, and there's lots of good things with that. I think it will give people flexibility. It means that they can kind of work when they need to or want to. They can have multiple contracts, as the article talks about. But there's going to be problems for things like getting a home loan, getting credit cards. Like at the moment, if you work part-time or you work for yourself, unless you've got a long history of actually earning a decent amount of income, it's pretty difficult to get a home loan. And so I think that is probably going to be one of the biggest problems.
All great points that might even tie into the blockchain conversation. Mike, what are your thoughts on this? LinkedIn founder predicting the death of the 9 to 5.
Well, first of all, it's not the best for a social media co-founder to be in the spotlight this week, with fears of either getting locked up or, forcing to admit that you were wrong. But I guess we'll get into that in a little bit. With respect to this is just another, doomsday type prediction when it comes to integrating AI into replacing people in the workforce. I think that, again, if AI is used in its most efficient capacity, it is designed to enhance efficiency of work. But if this does open up the opportunity, as it sort of points out here in the article, and people have this freelancer type opportunity, maybe this creates more of a small business model mindset. where people sort of work for themselves and they're able to freelance themselves out to, some of these other organizations and, just handle individual little tasks based around, one or two different clients. And maybe that's their job. Maybe that's their career. But when it comes to the typical 9 to 5, and Michelle, you brought up some good points with respect to credit, but I think that's a system that's going to ultimately be changing anyway. This global economy, this one world order type push is really trying to funnel people into this little social credit system. And maybe that social credit system doesn't necessarily rely on your pay stubs. Maybe it relies on, how many jobs you pick up as this freelancer in this type of economy. Regardless, I don't trust this guy. I don't know this guy. I don't like this guy. This guy falls into the same tech oligarchy as all the other clowns out there. So for him, what's in it for him? That's the question that I had as I was reading through this type of article. And, if LinkedIn is that, post my resume to get job opportunities type platform, well, this guy's definitely scaring the right people because he's going to force them to go onto that platform to find that freelance work.
All right. My response to this is I could not agree more strongly with everything this guy said. I stand starkly opposed to both you guys in that I think we're already seeing this. I agree with you that Reid is the tech oligarchy, Mike, for sure. But he's already made his money. He's just mouthing off. Here's my points.
He's on the deck chairs with little umbrellas in his cocktail glass.
There's been a movement in the world of work of people from money to meaning. Meaning they're looking for meaning from their work and not so much money anymore. That's why the complaints about the younger generation not wanting to work hard is rooted in the fact that it's not about money for them anymore. Number 2, AI empowerment. Totally agree. Now it's possible to make money on the scale of a company as an individual. Number 3, we saw that evolution from entrepreneur, freelancer into solopreneur, creator, call it what you want. There's a movement afoot of people leaving companies because they make enough money from their side hustle. And finally, the whole concept of social media, it's not even a social anymore. It is merely a distribution channel and a sales front, which is what we all complain about. But it's the front end of business. So my point is the tools are all there, the means, the motive, people are already in motion in this direction.
Well, LinkedIn is the perfect platform to help facilitate it. So again, whether he's sitting on a yacht somewhere drinking a cocktail with an umbrella, he actually put his name and his fat picture into this story. So, it's clearly there's something in it for him.
Well, I think that he's already made his money, and LinkedIn, I would argue, isn't really the work social media anymore. That they want to be TikTok, right? The vertical video feed, the whole 9 yards.
Well, even if that may be true, the platform itself still attracts people that are looking for jobs. I get messages all the time from people paying to send resumes and to see if people are hiring. It still is that platform. I don't get those same messages on any other platform.
No,
So
I agree with that.
Again, if this is the route that we're going, where we're not tied to a particular corporation and we're going to outsource our services and try to maximize, a wider reach with multiple companies or multiple entities, this is the platform that would facilitate that.
I want to expand on that, Mike. They're not tied to a corporation. All of our parents and grandparents were tied to a company for a stretch. Your career was dependent on what type of firm you worked at. And that hasn't existed in forever. My grandfather worked for the same company forever. My dad worked for 30 years for the same company. Our kids are never going to do that. And now you're seeing alliances of creators, we'll call them, or solopreneurs. These alliances where, Mike, the operational side. I know the sales side. Michelle's good with content. So we all partner up as we need into tiger teams that tackle projects. That's been going on. By the way, that's going on in the tech world for 30 years, but that's been going on in the corporate world now for at least 5 years. The new version of a company looks nothing like what the company traditionally looked like. And I don't think this is an anomaly. I think it's a tech-enabled change.
It's the resurrection of the small business. I love it.
Yes. I totally agree. That why would I work for 30 years for a company I know will fire me when I turn 55 if I can work for myself, work just as hard, and make, and pass it on to my kids?
But the reality is not everybody can run a business.
Correct.
80-20 rule.
I mean, that's a simple fact.
That's why you need a
there are
guy who handles operations. This guy.
Right. I agree with that.
But yes, and so I guess the thing is, and ultimately, all these, the Amazons and the Googles and the YouTubes of the world can't run without having people doing the work for them. So
Right, but
you're going
oftentimes-
to get those. Sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say those people at that end of the scale, so the owners of those businesses do want people who don't want to run a business. They want the minions, don't they? Whether you think you are or not.
But I'll do like content consulting, we'll call it, for massive investment banks out of New York, where I'm surprised, and I've said this to them, you don't have 10 of me on staff already, and they don't. So my point is, all these companies will always need these services that they're not going to be able to get in-house or don't want to build in-house. And so there's a need and a pay scale, really, for people who can put together these organizations, these small little fill in the gaps kind of thing. I think that's what we're going to see more of.
Well, where does the liability fall at that point, right? So I'll bring back a story that we talked about a long time ago, and this is specific to AI, but I guess you can just replace AI with these remote workers and call it the same thing. If somebody provides false information or inaccurate information and they're working on the behalf of the company, but they're not employed by the company, who's liable? And I'll use the Air Canada story when that provided false information in the form of an AI bot. Air Canada was held responsible because they're the ones that outsource that service. So
that's how it should be.
I don't disagree, but again, where does you got to factor in a few other underlying operational contingencies here with respect to insurance, how these outsourced entities are going to get taxed. There's all these underlying pieces here. There is some sort of a level of liability that nobody's going to want to take on, and that's going to create legal challenges that potentially could change legislation on
nothing
this.
Any different than was always the case when a big company hired out vendor services from a small company.
Yeah, but we're talking like when you're talking about specific employees. Okay, and I'll use a factory as an example. Right? You're not going to outsource these people to come in just randomly and work on machines in your factory, right? Like there's liability issues with that. You have to showcase specific, sometimes they're union, sometimes there's different safety protocols and certifications that they have to pass. You can't just toss somebody the keys to a forklift and say, here, go move that pallet, right? Like they need certifications for that.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is Michelle's point.
Well, I think we're all speaking the same language. I don't think we're combating each other. All I'm saying is that where does the liability fall? Does it fall on the corporation or does it fall on the individual to hold that protection?
It falls on whose end product has the stamp on it, meaning that if you are a big company and you hire the services of a vendor, no matter how big that vendor may be, you are responsible for what they give you to vet it.
Well, I mean, we've seen, haven't we? How well has it gone for big companies that have blamed a third party for some problem? Sports Illustrated, for example. Like ultimately people go, I don't care whether you hired, XYZ consulting. Ultimately, your name's the one that's on the door, and therefore you're responsible.
Microsoft CrowdStrike.
But the deflection of blame is the easy way out. Right. And that's how you can sort of justify it, not only to your customers, but to your shareholders as well, as far as you're doing everything in your power to cut costs, maximize profits. And if there's a mistake, guess what? There's no liability to that. So if that's going to exponentially get larger with outsourcing and not keeping internal people within an organization, you're going to see a diminished value of product and or service.
I think this doesn't matter. I respect your opinion, both of you, but the workers are going to do what they're going to do. They have a better option now to make as much or more money in an easier setup for themselves. They're all going to do this entrepreneur thing, and they should.
Okay, so let's focus on the title here, the 9 to 5. Not everybody has and is cut from that same, I want to, potentially make a lot more money and make things easier for themselves. They want to clock in at 9 and clock out at 5. And that's their mentality. So can they still do that under this type of scenario where they're out there hunting and only eat what they kill is in the form of, project work?
This is going to get controversial here, but years ago I read, I think it was Rich Dad, Poor Dad. There's two motivators for people that are working. Number one, they want money. When security, that's money. And number two, they want freedom. They're not the same thing. Two different types of people. The person who pulls out and does the entrepreneur thing wants the freedom, the autonomy of running their life. The person who just wants to go in, clock out, as you say, Mike, go home. They want the security that the job is there. They can put their kid through college. Neither is bad or good. But I think the 80-20 rule tells us, we already see this in society. 20% of the people who will collect the most money and have the most freedom will be that entrepreneur overclass. And 80% of the folks will be working for someone somewhere. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not casting aspersions. I just think that there's a shift happening because people who couldn't make that transition previous, suddenly now they have that opportunity to. So this is
one of the
brain
things
drain out of corporate.
Sorry, go on.
Please, Michelle.
One of the things I think too that is going on a lot more now than ever before, because of the internet and because of the opportunity that are around, is that people who are working a 9-to-5 job are doing something on the side after 5 and on the weekends and trying to build up something else. I mean, I think like my parents' generation, as you talked about with your parents and grandparents, Mark, you know, like they had jobs. They didn't need anything else. There was no, well, no, we're not going to, well, we've got a job. Why do I need to earn extra money? I get paid this and I get my holidays and, you know, we have one vacation every year and, you know, we own our home. Why do I need to be building? You know, there's a lot of people that are like that from that generation. But now, I think that more and more, and it would be really interesting to see what the stats are on that. I mean, part of the problem you've got is that a lot of people are doing that on the side, and the people who they're working 9-to-5 for have no idea that they're doing anything else. So it's hard to get surveys, I guess, or information about that kind of stuff and be accurate.
If you read on this stuff, Michelle, I agree with you. Generationally speaking, the older folks believe there's something wrong with that. That if you're working for an employer and you have something on the side, you're basically stealing and cheating. The younger generation feels this is their right, that you don't own me after hours and I can do what I do with my time on my time.
Oh, I disagree with that, man, wholeheartedly. I think that's a way outside of the major umbrella. You know, but again, you know, we all have different backgrounds here, right? My parents were, you know, they were their own business owners, right? So they didn't work for some major corporation down the street with the rest of the town. You know, they had a small business and they ran it for 40 years. So, you know, like that's sort of like how I grew up in that mentality. But, you know, the rule of thumb is that whatever that 9-to-5 quote unquote job is the one that just pays your bills. If you want to make money, there has to be some sort of other residual income slated on the table that you can sort of lean on and continuously build. And if you do it right, if you do it with patience, if you do it step by step, and if you do it in a way where you see the growth, then there is no 9-to-5 mentality anymore. What you're going to do is you're going to build that entity up to a point where you can not only sustain the 9-to-5 paycheck that pays your bills, but continuously have that ceiling where it's the sky's the limit.
I think the social compact that has existed in society is now broken. Companies took care of their employees. Employees were loyal to the company. That's over, clearly. And so now it is, you're on your own. You can side hustle if you want to make money. The company's job is shareholder value, can the people when they can hire 2 people for the price of you. That this is opening the door, and technology now enables people to walk through. For me to just walk away. I left Wall Street for that reason and just said, I can do this on my own. So my point is, I think a lot of people are not, this is not just Reid Hoffman spewing. This is what's happening. And I don't think
it's been happening forever, man. I mean, how many times do companies cut people who have been at the company for 20 years, 30 years without that loyalty factor to hire 5 people in Pakistan at half the cost?
Which will soon be 5 agentive AI programs.
Correct. But my point is that this is just the next evolution of something that's already been happening. And guess what? There's still 9-to-5s out there. So that's where I disagree with him that, you know, and bringing up a lot of points that Michelle brought up earlier, there will still need to be a hands-on type of endeavor. AI, anything that's outsourced is not going to come and fix my electricity when it's down. I need an electrician to do that.
So this is Michelle's excellent point, by the way. The tradespeople will still be doing the trades thing. There are segments of the economy that you just can't, but that segment shrinks. Because if 90%, this is a good question. What percent of the middle class is in a 9-to-5 job? I don't know the answer to that.
I would argue a lot.
Right. So let's say it's 85%. That's going to go down to like 45% because these people can make as much money or more and pass their, you can't pass your job to your kid, but you can pass your company.
but motivation is something that really isn't taught.
Yeah.
So you need to be motivated in order to take that step. If not, you're going to go out and you're going to find the agency that's going to take that step in order to outsource these people into these positions to replace that 9 to 5. You become an actor or a free agent.
But we're in a window of time where people were shunted into a job for generations that now there's a lot of folks in that bucket that really want to crab claw their way out and do their own thing, and now they can. And we're seeing that. So what's left at the end of it, in my opinion, the bottom of the barrel worker bee who's not ambitious stays at the companies. The people who want to do better go out and do better. And if in need be, they take over companies later on down the road with their organization. That'll take a decade to play out. But I really think that what we're about to see is an overturning of the established order of companies.
It's going to be difficult because they're bigger.
Yeah, I agree. Let's get us closer to the origin of this program. We're going to take it to a blockchain story. Story number 2. Sony unveils Sonium blockchain. Sony Block Solutions Labs, which is a subsidiary of Sony Group, has announced the development of a new blockchain to integrate Web3 into their products. Sonium will be a public blockchain. It's a layer 2 on Ethereum, and it's going to support gaming, NFT marketplaces, and other entertainment services. Their goal, obviously, is to create new revenue streams and strengthen fan engagement. So this is, as we have talked about on this program, going back now 91 episodes, very few large companies are making the big push into blockchain right now. There was an early one with the NFT craze, and now we're starting to see a little bit. We'll start with you, Mike. This seems closer to your world. What do you think about Sony unveiling the new Sonium blockchain?
I'm like 90 for 90 on predictions here. All I got to say is watch out, PlayStation, because this is where things are going to be stored from now on. And that's going to lead to some sort of a digital wallet integration that allows you to interact with this is all a snowball that we called 100 years ago at this point. Sony developing their blockchain is not surprising. The only surprising piece that I find is that they're leveraging off of Ethereum, which brings us to a deeper discussion that we have pretty frequently on the show. And, it's been a while since at least I've been here. And, since then, Bitcoin has gone up, it's gone down, it's gone up, it's gone down. Same thing with Ethereum. Ethereum hit Wall Street with their futures. But I think this is yet again, the fact that they built a level 2 off of Ethereum. Ethereum is solidified as that builder chain that some of these companies will be able to leverage on in order to have some sort of uniformity between the Ethereum network and whichever company and chain they're developing.
Mike, are you surprised they're using Ethereum? They're building on Ethereum?
I am. I would have expected them to either build it on their own. But if this is a trend that's going to happen, this is going to empower the entire Ethereum infrastructure, because now you're talking about that bridging capability between the same layers or the same network, just layered in different layer 2 solutions. So, for example, if Sony came out with their own particular blockchain on their native coin, completely separate from Ethereum, the bridging process would be much different. But with an Ethereum wallet, you can easily create an account, whether that's provided to you when you buy your PlayStation or not, is irrelevant. But when you purchase tokenized systems within the Ethereum network, you can easily bridge it from layer to layer because it's all part of the same digital wallet.
I think I was going to think about that. Michelle, before I pontificate, what do you think about this? Is this something that, we've been calling this. Do you think this works?
I think that it certainly expands the use cases for them having their own chain and them being able to do things like NFTs within PlayStation environments and all of that sort of stuff. We have talked about that a lot over the past 2 years, particularly. But one of the things I think that is interesting here is that they, and we've also said this, as Marc mentioned before, they've created their own, rather than what we're finding is that rather than go and buy one of the little chains that someone's already created and done half the work, which you would get for pennies on the dollar, as a good American saying goes. You know, they haven't done that. They've created their own. And so, you know, we are seeing that, aren't we? So rather than, I mean, I don't know, is it because they think that, you know, other particular chains or some of the stuff that came in the early days of the Web3 revolution, that they're tainted with the old, you know, crypto bro brush? So they want to start something new, or do they want it to be proprietary only to them? I mean, I think that it's an interesting development of them, rather than going to, you know, you could essentially say buying a blockchain off of the shelf because someone's already created it. But in terms of gameplay and stuff like that, I think that eventually PlayStations will come with a wallet, probably in the PlayStation. People won't even know what they're doing.
It'll be an extension of their screen name.
Yeah.
So
you know, like I think that will happen.
Let's just throw it to our Bolt community, because obviously they have their own chain. You know, it's not easy. It's very costly. There's efficiency components and testings that need to happen. This is not an overnight solution. And I'm not suggesting that, you know, their own version or layer 2 off of Ethereum is easier, but it's the same thing as creating your own smart contract for a collection versus building one, you know, any of the Ethereum, any 721A, 721, any of these like standardized contracts that you can easily build your own project off of. And look, if this is the foundation of what other companies can do, again, this empowers Ethereum. It makes the value of that go up exponentially higher, but it also creates that uniformity, that global, I'll call it, and, you know, I'll shoot myself later for it, but this global currency that you can interact with between Sony and Walmart and Amazon, if they all have their own individual layer 2s off of the same network.
So that's where I was going to go with this. To both of your points, I think that I think of the railroads as an analogy, like the back in the 1800s, building railroads. You can build your own railroad, or it's easier just to make one that fits the one that's existing across transcontinental. Ethereum is well established. Everyone understands it. There's wallets. It's already up and running. So all you're doing is building for interoperability later would be the term. And I think Sony's is the model for this. I think other companies will copy that.
And I think too, the other thing that is worth thinking about, you know, are they, you know, what does it mean in terms of being able to transact more easily or share? You know, like at the moment, I guess you have a marketplace where you can buy and sell particular things, you know, whether it be swords or helmets or whatever. And we've talked many a times how I live for the day when I'm going to be able to get my money back from all the Fortnite skins I had to pay for my kid. If they can ever be turned into NFTs, please. But you know, like how that, the ease of which people will be able to do that in a secure environment because of the blockchain, like people being, I would hope that it would lead to people being scammed less in terms of trades and stuff like that because of it being on the blockchain and you knowing that the piece that, or the, you know, the sword or whatever it is you're buying is authentic. I think that is one of the benefits of having things like this on the blockchain.
So flag this part of it, and I think you just hit the nail on the head with an important point that we didn't discuss. There still is not a security protocol in place that's rock solid. And, you know, people can lose their NFTs, and, you know, some people called it a right to passage into Web3 and all that stuff. Try telling a gamer that he lost his skins that he spent hours building and trying to gain. I mean, you want to talk about controllers through the wall. That's a death sentence for these types of networks. If they get hacked, if they're linked to any social media and they click on the wrong link on Twitter or Facebook or whatever, and it drains their player account with either the Sony tokens, which can ultimately purchase other, like, you're going to see a whole mess of different security issues that I really hope Sony has sort of a game plan for, because that's going to be an important factor here.
No question they don't. So here's my thoughts on this. Number one, the build versus buy thing. To your point earlier, Michelle, I wanted to comment. it's a culture thing. Some companies buy the tech that they need. Morgan Stanley, when I worked there, did that. Some companies build their own. Goldman Sachs. The different companies are run differently, and it's got to do with management. But right now, with Sony being a bellwether large technology firm building on the Ethereum chain, a layer 2, I really think that becomes the model now, and all we can see more of this. We're going to expect large companies to just follow suit. I'm not saying, Mike, to your point, that it's easier. I agree with you. It's still the same difficulty, but the interoperability is already there. Number 2, your point, I think, Mike, you raised it around the PlayStation wallet, and Michelle, you mentioned this as well. That is the big key takeaway from this story in my mind that people should keep their eyes on, that there will be a wallet, that they won't call it a wallet, that it's just going to be, already people think of a gaming console as you can store your game save progress there. It's that concept, not called a wallet. When you make it easy for people to do what they're already doing, they'll do more of it. And I really think that then that opens up the door to, well, that's potentially banking. That could be project building. You do whatever you want with it. Sony actually hasn't said what they are going to do specifically yet. They're just entertainment services. But it's clear they recognize that this is the direction it's moving in. And I applaud them for that.
So if anybody knows anything about the .ens names, that is just an easier way to have that string defined as part of a screen name. And when you start your PlayStation account, the first thing you do is you set up a screen name. It's not going to be any different from that. The difference between this, well, there's a couple pieces of this that are going to be important. Number one, if they're leveraging the blockchain component, that means all of the data that is globally stored on something like PlayStation, and we're very heavily focused on PlayStation. We're not talking anything other about what Sony's involved in. But PlayStation is clearly the one that I think is going to get the most worldwide traffic with respect to use of these tokens. But you're talking about not having a server farm store all this data anymore. You're talking about these transactions running on a blockchain network. And, maybe you can argue that membership fees into this system or whatever it is, like some sort of a paid component is going to cover the minimal gas fees that are associated, because let's not forget, it still is Ethereum. Right. So they're still going to have to pay for that. But getting back to the .ens names, this is that compatibility that I was trying to reference earlier. If that ENS name is linked to your screen name, now that same wallet can be pulled up on something like OpenSea, or it can be pulled up on all these other marketplace projections of what information is currently in that wallet. And that wallet could be shared from platform to platform. That point right there is the nucleus of Web3. You don't need 78 logins. You have one .ens name, and it covers as many different platforms as you want to log into.
That's a good point. Make it easy for people. All right, I was going to take us. Okay, Michelle, final comments?
No. I was going to say yes. I agree with that.
Our favorite part of the show here is going to be Conspiracy Corner. I'm asking my colleagues to don their tinfoil as we discuss Mark Zuckerberg saying that COVID censorship was wrong. Mark Zuckerberg has stated his company did censor social posts about COVID during the pandemic. He said it was due to pressure by senior White House officials in 2021 here in the States. I don't know if I should start with you on this one, Michelle, so we can save the fire that Mike's probably got in his belly there. Michelle, what do you think about this? Mark Zuckerberg, COVID censorship. Why is he commenting on it now?
Mike's not even prepared to put on his tinfoil hat. He threw it across the room. So I guess he doesn't think it's
tinfoil,
a conspiracy theory at all. I guess he thinks it is a conspiracy. What do I want to say about this? I want to say about this that I think that hindsight is a wonderful thing. I think that there are a lot of things people would do differently. As a part-time historian, I can tell you that there are many a time in history where things could have, should have been done different. And this is probably no exception. There was a lot of stuff around COVID. It was something that we hadn't experienced before. We didn't know. And there was a lot of crazy shit going on out there, and people were getting confused or anxious or scared. So, all right, Mike. I think it's an interesting thing that Americans talk a lot about freedom, yet from the outside looking in, you guys are regulated and controlled way more than you think you are. So that's just a point.
Well, not everybody thinks that. Some people think that, we are definitely getting screwed. But what I think about this story, I think Zuckerberg's diaper is filled. I think he saw what happened in France with the Telegram co-founder. I think that he sees the writing on the wall and the momentum on the way things are moving politically in this country. And I think that, there's one of three options that must be true here. Number one, he either came to his realization and he said, you know what, I screwed up and here's my formal apology. Not really going to believe that one. Number two, there's a whistleblower that's about to come out with certain information. And I think one actually has since this article was published. Just an internal video that started circulating about him explaining to his employees not to take the vaccination. Or three, he has this fear that he's going to start, getting arrested or start getting prosecuted for not only the things that, the crossing the line between politics and government and private entity, but also this 230 protection opens the door, if that's stripped from him, to become liable for all sorts of other things. So I don't know if this is him just trying to get ahead of a tsunami that potentially could be coming down on him. But let's not forget, because I'm old enough to remember, that Facebook was one of the forefronts about this censorship brigade. They were hiring these third-party companies to go out there and fact check all of these different places and pieces that were posted on those platforms. And they were actually deciding which ones they felt were relevant enough to get in front of people based around the content. And if what he's admitting to now is accurate, and who knows, there's potentially going to be congressional hearings to it. This letter was addressed to a member of Congress, the Senate in particular. His diaper is full. I'm telling you, he is shitting himself right now.
All right, so I want to draw one distinction between what's happening to the founder of Telegram. He was arrested in Paris for not playing ball with the government censors versus Zuckerberg, who clearly was playing ball with the government and now is trying to do an about face. So that's the only thing but I agree with you, Mike. I do think that he's trying to get ahead of whatever political movements he's foreseeing. Zuckerberg had no qualms about censoring things. All of a sudden now he's the good guy. I feel like when an Elon Musk who's hated is vilified, but he's okay with that. Zuckerberg is not standing up for principles in that manner here. I think that he's playing the wind, if you will. Now, how this goes, who knows? I do agree that with censorship, I do think it's pretty clear. Michelle, to your point about Americans being controlled, we're realizing it. I think folks they believed what they read and heard on social. And now folks are like, well, wait a minute. And with that type of a waking up, let's call it, Zuckerberg is definitely in risk politically and potentially legally. So, yeah, this is a CYA move, in my opinion. We'll see.
A lot more respect for the guy if he posted this on Threads.
There's an inside joke here about between these two. That Threads has 0 users. Yeah, he didn't post it on Threads. That's a good point, Mike. Honestly.
Yeah, because nobody would have saw it.
All right. I don't want to belabor this one, but final thoughts on this. I'll take us into the speed round. All right.
It's not a conspiracy if it keeps coming true.
We can remove our tinfoil since it seems like it wasn't really a conspiracy. All right. Taking us into the speed round, we do just a quick rundown of what's gone on that didn't make it for the full cut of a story discussion. Russia is challenging U.S. dominance with a new cryptocurrency exchange plan. Russia's creating several cryptocurrency exchanges. This is making waves primarily in the finance world. We're talking Wall Street, stock market, etc. Thoughts around this one very quickly. Mike, good, bad? What's the story here?
I read an article like this, and my first reaction to it is, since when is the U.S. the dominant in the cryptocurrency? If I was Dubai or Hong Kong, I'd be pissed reading something like this. They've literally come out and made entire infrastructures and claims that they want to be the hub for this. And meanwhile, we're just regulating it out of existence. So this is once again, two brick walls trying to square off against each other. I said it here before with respect to the Saudis and the oil deal. If Russia puts the oil that they have in their country on a token and tokenizes that for sale around the world, they are light years ahead of everybody else right now.
Michelle, thoughts around this?
I think that it will have a big impact, as it says in the article, on the price of Bitcoin. If what it talks about does come true, then, you know, the people talking about 100,000 or whatever and more for Bitcoin, because it is a finite asset. There is only a number of them, and you've talked about this a lot, Marc, in terms of the value of Bitcoin and what it's used for. I think that they have to do something, don't they? Because the fact that they are blocked from really using US dollars for a lot of their exchange, you know, they don't have the same buying power as they used to because of the war with the Ukraine. So I think that they are looking at other avenues to be able to raise money and to use it as a currency with people who are still prepared to trade with them.
I agree 110%. This is directly related to the war in Ukraine. U.S. shutting down Russia's access to the banking system. This is the pushback. And I also think this is the biggest story in the world right now, bigger than everything we've covered. I know I'm from that background, so probably I'm biased. But the reality is, who controls the money controls the world. And the United States regulating it out of existence is what, to your point, Mike, it's opening the door for Russia to step in and say, okay, here's a way to get the thumb in the eye of the Americans, move their world off of the dollar dependency, and potentially control. Now, here's the distinction. Bitcoin versus everything else. I've maintained this all the way through. You guys know this already. The cryptocurrency, in my mind, in this context with Russia, does not mean Bitcoin. It means everything but Bitcoin, specifically Ethereum. Bitcoin is going to be a preservation of wealth and will remain. That's its function because you can't print it. But everything else is printable. And that means that whoever controls the crypto world controls the ability to print money. So this is a battle for the reserve currency of the world, in my mind. And that means that, like I said, you have unlimited access to funds to fund any amount of war or anything you want to do if you have free access to money. Like, you just print it at will. So I think this is something worth keeping an eye on. It's not a short story, meaning this will take years to play out. But yeah, this is the great game that Great Britain was playing back in the 1800s in the modern version.
So is Bitcoin the fallback reserve? Something similar to a modern day gold?
Yeah. So this is conspiratorial now, but this is what I believe. There's going to be a transition out of the dollar. At some point, the US dollar will no longer be the reserve currency that trade happens in. And when that happens, the Americans lose the ability to print money. And when that happens, the inflation that's going to hit the world will be astronomical. And so nothing like we see today. What you want to protect against that would either be gold or something that they can't print, which would be oil, Bitcoin, real estate, all the things that the wealthy right now are snapping up. And so there's a preparation in the world of, we're transitioning off the dollar. What do I have that's not going to be able to be inflated away?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, I know we're sticking on this, even though it's a speed round, but don't you find it interesting that a decentralized system is going into one of the most fascistic regimes in the world? And the fact that, like, everything is top-down government control. Now you're going to rely on the fact that a currency or some sort of medium of exchange / security is now regulated in a decentralized format.
So you raise a good point, Mike, and the decentralized aspect will be shunted away and it becomes a centralized technology thing. Blockchain doesn't necessarily need to be decentralized, right? It can be controlled if you can print. Ethereum right now is liable to government regulation. Right? They can shut that thing down if they wanted to. But Bitcoin, that's not the case.
But that's a consensus government regulation. I don't feel every government would agree to it.
You know how you would do it if you wanted to do it? You would arrest the founders.
Oh, like Telegram?
Oh. Oh, yeah. I didn't realize. Which is exactly what happened. I mean, Ripple, there's a whole line of, like, Gary Gensler's made a list of guys he's gone after. And Zuckerberg, by the way, if your guys will remember, Libra, when Facebook was going to roll out their coin, a digital coin, that's when the U.S. government suddenly got serious about cracking down on that stuff. So I view a distinction between Bitcoin, which you cannot stop. It is international. There's no headquarters. There's no founder. There's no one to prosecute. So it persists. And it's a problem for the governments. And everything else, which you can regulate away by arresting people.
So I have a question. What's stopping a V2 of Bitcoin from being developed?
It's called futures, and they did develop it. They have that out right now. You can trade futures. In fact, they're rolling out mini Bitcoins that trade at a 50th of the value. So you can go ahead.
I guess the point I'm making is that is it possible Ethereum, especially with all this power that it's accumulating with companies like Sony starting to build on it, is it possible that Ethereum becomes this same decentralized format where there is no owner, there is no company, there is nobody to arrest? It's a self-governing operating system.
Well, it is self-governing right now, Mike, but there is someone to arrest.
I get that, but there doesn't always need to be.
I agree. But my point is, as long as the government knows who's running it, it's fine. You can just keep an eye on things. The problem is when no one's running it and it's actually working.
The CIA runs Bitcoin.
I don't have my tinfoil on for this.
I threw mine across the room.
That was actually my final speed round story for today. So I think we're going to cut that one short. But I would like to run through a real quick recap and get your guys' final thoughts on what we discussed today. So episode 91, the death of the 9 to 5, we discussed how Reid Hoffman thinks that the regular job is going away, predicting the end of it by 2034. Sony has unveiled the new blockchain, which is actually quite interesting, and they seem to be doing it the right way. And Mark Zuckerberg, censorship, admits to it finally. And of course, Russia, new cryptocurrency exchange. Michelle, we'll start with you. What was the big takeaway from you that you got from this week's set of stories? What should we be keeping an eye on?
I think that the PlayStation story is probably, while I understand the Russia Bitcoin thing is an interesting thing and that'll play out how it plays out, but I think the PlayStation story is probably the one that will make the biggest strides the quickest. I think once they get that working and sorted, the onboarding and the on-ramp for Web3 through PlayStation and its network and the gamers will be huge. And I think that we need to watch this space.
Mike, what was your big takeaway from this week's stories?
I'm going to combine them all. I'm going to say Zuckerberg moves to Russia, creates a token, jumps into the metaverse, hops on PlayStation, and works a 9 to 5 in the metaverse.
He would be he would be working selling. Was it hot dogs? What were they selling in the metaverse?
I saw Wendy's had an operation. You could build IKEA furniture. There's a ton of stuff you could do in there.
Yeah,
right. Believe it or not, I'm going to surprise you guys. As much as I agree with you that the generational playing out of the finance thing, Michelle, the death of the 9 to 5. I really think that's the big takeaway here. We are in the midst of a revolution in entrepreneurship, and I think this will continue. As a dad and as a small business owner myself, and same with you two, I feel like this is the big story today, and the momentum is growing. I don't know what big companies will do, but the concept of AI and agentic workflows, where I don't need workers, and then workers don't need to be inside of a company, we're about to see something that we've never seen before in this world, not since the Middle Ages. Guilds and independent workers doing their own thing. It's feudalism. Like I don't know where we're going, but there's a big change happening, and I'm fascinated by it. All right, that's all we had for you this week. Thoughts, Michelle?
No, I said very good.
Appreciate you guys listening in. Special shout out to the Bolt folks. We thank you every week. You guys are there to support us. We'll be back next week, regular time, 9:30 a.m. Eastern time for the time being. And the purpose here for this program, for those who don't know, Business on the Block, is to bring you insights and a business conversation around the digital changes in business and how we can profit from them. Things like Sony going on to the Ethereum layer 2. And that's really all I have. I want to thank everyone for joining us. Mike, Michelle, final thoughts?
Follow us on Threads.
Bye.